To make your pajama pants, the first thing you are going to need to do is get your pattern size. So the patterns that I have that I'm making this video off of and that you are going to be using, they're quite old and they have been used through many classes of mine now. So you are going to have to be careful with them. And they're also not typically what a pattern is made out of. I copied them onto poster board. So typically patterns are more kind of airy and easy to pin through. These are going to be a little bit harder. But the first thing you're going to do is plan what size you're going to make. For this video, I am going to use an extra small just for the sake of time, but I will not be putting these on. I'm going to give them to my daughters. So to do that, the first thing you are going to do is measure your hips. So you're going to get a measuring tag and you are going to put it around the widest part of your hips right here. Measure it, see what that goes to on your sheet. On your instructions right here, it kind of tells you what size those are for. Now these are elastic pants, so they don't have to fit perfectly. So if you measure around a small, but you're like, these are PJ pants, I want them a little bigger, then make a medium or a large, or make an extra large. I really don't care. I would say most students just kind of pick what size that they would buy at a store, and that is fine. Also, what you're going to do is you're going to lay out your fabric. And now, again, these are the two smallest patterns. If you use a big pattern, like an extra large or a large, that is when you're going to take up more fabric. So that is why, depending on what size you're using, some of you needed 2 yards of fabric, some of you needed 2.5. And it's really going to depend on how big of pants you make. Step 1 for the layout says fold the fabric in the layout diagram below so the right sides are together and the selvage edges are even. Be sure the bottom edge is towards you. So I have my piece of fabric folded in half. You see, so I open it up and there's more under here. I have lined up the selvage, which is this white part that you see here. That is from the manufacturing company, so it doesn't unravel. You're going to lay right sides together. Place the front and the back patterns printed side up on the fabric as the diagram below. So if you look at the picture on your instructions, it'll show you this. What I'm doing is I have the front right here and I'm placing it, and it can go very close to the edge, but you actually are not putting this on the fold. If you remember from doing the bucket hat, we placed the pattern pieces on the fold and didn't cut the fold. That is not the case this time. When we are done, we want 4 separate pieces. So you can line it up all the way to the edge if you need to, but you're gonna have to cut it into another piece. So it's easier if you can leave a little room so you can cut behind that. And then I'm gonna lay this out, and I am not overlapping these pattern pieces at all. And I'm not overlapping them, and they are not going over the selvage because we don't want that. And again, the fold, we're leaving some room. So pinning it, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, is a little bit more difficult just because of the material that this is out of. But you'll see a ton of little pokes in some of these, especially on the more popular sizes. So really, it's just important that these don't move while you're cutting, so that the pattern doesn't shift when we start cutting. So we are not going to actually cut with the rotary cutters. We are going to cut with scissors, with these turquoise scissors. These ones are the turquoise scissors because these ones are the sharper ones that should cut this pretty easily. So you are going to see that I am going to pin this and kind of fold it back out every time so it kind of stays in place. I am just doing it every couple inches so it stays. And again, it is a little bit harder to do this, I am aware, but this is the cheapest way to do it as a school. So You are going to keep going and doing this. And I will come back when I'm done. Okay, if you look on the page that says flannel print pants, important information, this is where you're going to find some important information for the entire project. So it says, always pin and stitch with right sides together unless otherwise instructed. So if it does not specifically say in the step, it's always right sides together. You will use a 5/8 seam allowance the entire video, again, unless otherwise instructed. So don't come ask me what seam allowance you're supposed to use. It is always 5/8, and if you're supposed to use something else, it will tell you. Stitch length, you're going to keep it to 2 or 2.5. Use the back stitch if you can, if your machine works. Pressing, it is best to press the seams open as you complete each step. This is more for like a comfortable wear on the inside, so things stay cleaner and like pushed away rather than like rubbing up on your skin. So now that I have all of this pinned, I don't know how well you can tell in the video, we are going to start cutting it out. So it says lay out the fabric as directed, and now we are going to cut. So you are just going to cut right next to the pattern piece as straight and as even as you can, but it does not necessarily have to be perfect. We are all just trying our best here. Do not cut over any pins if there's any pins poking out. So just make sure you either readjust the pin or take it out. On these pajama pants as well, you should see some notches. Now, if you remember, the notch is a little kind of puzzle piece that comes out of the pattern. It kind of like pokes out, and you like naturally kind of want to cut it off, but you're supposed to cut out that little triangle. If your pattern still has them from the literal 10 years that I've been using these throughout all the classes I've had, I think I made these pattern pieces in 2014 or 15 maybe. Cut those out, but if they don't worry. All pajama pants will still turn out nicely. So we are just going to cut, which is a little difficult because the pattern pieces are bigger, but if you can see, I'm kind of holding up my hand here. I'm kind of holding up the fabric to keep it straight as I cut. And now after I'm done cutting both of these, you cannot just keep the pattern piece on it in case someone else in the class needs the pattern piece, or if I have another period that needs it. But you are going to want to label which is the front, or this one's the front, it says right here, and this one's the back, it says right here. You are going to want to label the two piles because they are different. Though they look exactly the same, the measurements on them are actually different, which is why there's two pattern pieces and not just one. So you want to make sure you do that. So here I cut one, leave that to the side. Now I'll cut the other. All right, now the next step I'm going to do now that I have this is undo all the pins that I just put in there, and I'm going to put them back in my pin cushion, and then I will have my two separate piles. Okay, the first step says pin each front to a back. So I have my two piles here. This is a back, this is a front. These can go away. Pin each front to a back along the straight edge with the right sides together. So I'm going to take one of these, and I'm going to match them up in which I can put the right sides. together. Now on the fabric that I'm using, it's kind of hard to tell which is the right side or which is the wrong side, but hopefully some of yours are a lot easier than that. So what you're going to do is I'm going to put this one out of the way for now. I have my two pieces right sides together, so that means that one of the pieces is right on top of the other, see? And I'm only going to pin along the straight edge right here. See the little curve over here? I am not doing anything with that right now, but I do want to make sure that it is perfectly lined up. If you happen to have notches, this is where you're going to want to see that your notches are lining up. Now, when you also line these up, remember that these are two different pattern pieces, which means that they are not going to be the same size. So as I'm starting to be perfectly lined up on the straight edge over here, the edge here, which is a little hard to tell right now because the pattern is so similar, but it does not line up over here, and that is correct. That is what we are looking for. If you think about it, this is the butt area, and your butt is a little bit bigger than the front side of your body, right? So the butt needs a little bit more room. Therefore, we need more fabric, and that is why one piece is bigger than the other. So all I am doing again in this step is pinning the straight side. And I am going to do this with both pattern pieces, with both sets. I'm going to do one here. I'm going to do my other pant leg over there. So I will come back when that's all done. Okay, the next step says stitch and finish the seams using a 5/8 seam allowance, press seam open. So I am only sewing the straight edge, but I am doing it for both pattern pieces or sets. Only the straight side. Don't worry about anything else right now. If you're able, back stitch at the beginning and the end of each seam. Now I'm going to do my other pant leg, and I will be back when I'm done. Okay, the next step is pressing the seam open. So we just sewed the straight side. Now while it's still the right or the wrong sides out, I'm going to lay it flat on my table like this. And I'm going to take the seam and lay it flat. So it is open like this. And I'm going to press it down the whole way down the pant leg. And I'm going to do that on both sides. This should be pretty easy. Now, if you have fleece, if you have like a furry fabric, don't do this, or like practice on a scrap first. A lot in the past has burnt the fabric. So if you are working with a fabric that's not just like a cotton, make sure that you practice on a piece first. You can maybe play around with the different settings just to see what might work best for you and your kind of fabric. And if you don't know, you can ask me and I can try and help you. And otherwise, if you have to not do this step because it is going to burn your fabric, then you don't have to. It's not the end of the world. It kind of makes things cleaner. So again, now you can't really see the seam. It's not really poking up anymore. It is just lying flat. I'm going to do that with both of them. All right, now that both of my seams are pressed open, yay, it says pin each front to a back along the inner legs. So now I have it wide open, And I want the right sides together. So I'm now going to close it. And I am going to pin. Move that back just a little bit. I'm going to pin from the bottom up until the top of the curve. I am not going to pin the curve. And now this is also the spot where these two fabrics don't really match up. You can kind of see right here the lighter side, and it has about like an inch and a half that it doesn't line up, but that is what it was supposed to be. But to pin, we are now going to bring them even. So it'll be a little bit baggy, but I'm going to actually start up here at the curve, at like the tip of the curve, because I want this to match up perfectly. Because if the bottom doesn't match up perfectly, this is easier to trim than the curve up here. So again, I'm bringing these even together because we want to sew them together and we want that little extra room inside. So this is all good stuff. So I'm going to pin both of these together, and when I am done, I'll be back. All right, I have both of my PJ pant legs pinned now, and again, only from the curve to the pants all the way down to the bottom, and it says stitch and finish the seams using a 5/8 seam allowance and press the seam open. So we are doing the exact same steps, just a smaller line this time. Both sides are now pinned. I'm going to do the other one, and then we will go press the seam open. I'll be back when I'm done with both of those. All right, this next step says turn just one leg inside out, or right side out. So I am going to turn this around, and it is the right side now. Now I'm going to put this one down, and I'm going to pick up the one that is inside out still. Okay, I have the one that's inside out. Now I'm going to take the right side out one, the bottom, and I'm going to put it inside the one that's inside out. And now what I'm going to do is match up the tops of each. So the kind of U part, like the curve that we were talking about earlier, lines up. And if you need help with this, just ask me. I'll be happy to help you. Okay, so now I have one inside of the other, and you can like barely tell right now. I have the two different pieces. The right sides are together, and the outside is facing out. So you can see a seam right here and a seam right here. And now it says that we are going to match the raw edges at the crotch area, and that is this. We are going to pin along this U shape that you see right here where the curve is. We're going to pin. Do not do anything with the top. If you do something with the top, then we won't be able to get our body into the pants, which defeats the purpose of pants. So again, we are going to pin along the U, and then it says that we are going to sew the entire seam twice, one on top of the other. So I'm going to pin it, and then I'm going to sew the U. So you got to be kind of careful because we're only sewing this line. We're not sewing anything like in the back here. So you have to make sure that you lay it correctly in your sewing machine. And we're going to sew it once, and then we're going to sew directly on top of it again. So when I start to pin here, I'm actually going to line up the bottom of the U first, like the top of both of the seams, just to make sure that the pants really line up perfectly. And then I'm going to work my way up one side and work my way up the other. All right, now I'm going to start sewing that seam. And remember that you are sewing kind of in a U, so you want to be careful. You're still at a 5/8 seam allowance. And what I did here is I took out the case, like stuff case, just because I feel like I'm able to see better. Okay, so I sewed the seam once. You can see my little blue line there. The top is still open, so don't sew the top, just the U. And now I'm going to sew it again. And my goal is to just sew right on top of the line that I already made. Because if you think about putting on a pair of pants, that area takes a lot of force because that's kind of what you're pulling your pants up from. And it's just kind of like tightening that seam so it doesn't just become a big hole. I ran out of bobbin. All right, I rewound my bobbin and I finished that little piece that I wasn't done yet. Now it says trim the seam allowance to 1/4 before continuing. So what that means is where I just sewed, this is the U section. What I'm going to do is take my scissors and I'm going to cut off some of this bulk. So I'm going to get like about halfway, I'm going to cut off all of it. What that is going to do is just make less room for fabric that you just don't need. So you can kind of see here where the seam is, and I'm just cutting this off. All right, this next part here, I'm looking at this last line here. It says, baste about 3 inches of all 4 seam allowances to the garment at the waist edge. What that is saying, baste. This was one of our vocabulary words from like the first week of school. And I have the definition right here, like what to do. It says, adjust your stitch length to 3.5. Over here, I originally had it at 2, and I'm actually going to put it to 4. I like putting it at the biggest one. Basting, again, is a temporary stitch that you can eventually take out. So what we're going to do, each seam along the top of the pants, which I will show you in a second, we are just going to open it up, and it should already be open from when we pressed it down. And we are going to put a few stitches in, just a few inches of stitches on both sides to keep it down. So at this point, you can actually take your other leg out of the inside. So now you have a resemblance of actual pants. And along the top here, you are going to have 4 seams. 1, 2 on both sides, and then 1 on the front, 1 on the back. What's nice about the one on the front and the back is we already trimmed these. So we can actually skip that step for the front and the back one. That was the one from the U. So we literally, the step before, just trimmed those. So you shouldn't have to sew those down. But the outside ones, we are going to sew down a little bit. But a little hack is you can just trim these ones too if you want. If you want, you can just cut down both sides of the pants and trim it, and then you won't have to do this part. I am going to do this part just so I can show you, because especially those of you with the big fluffy pants, this part is a little easier because your fabric is a lot thicker. So in a few steps when we get to the elastic, that is when you're going to see that when it bunches up in there, it's actually really hard to move the elastic through, and it all makes sense in a second. So I am just going to, these are already pressed down, so they are nice and flat. You can barely even see the seam right here, but it's right here. These lay flat, and I'm going to sew just like 2 inches down one side and 2 inches down the other, just so it stays down. I'm going to trim these in a second, but as you can see there, they're just pinned down a little bit. Now I'm going to do the other side. Now I have my other side done. And if you can see, these are really big stitches because they are temporary. We want to take them out later. We don't want to see these on our final product. And this makes it easier to take them out. If you've never had to seam rip yet, then you don't know how hard it is to get under those little tiny ones sometimes. So these bigger ones make it easier. They are not to hold anything together permanently. Temporary stitch. Okay, this next segment of instructions is a little bit confusing and a little bit weird, but basically the next step is forming the top of the pants and making like a casing for the elastic to go. So it says based 1.5 inches from the upper edge, we are going to use a ruler and tailor's chalk to make marks. And this will mark the fold line for the casing and will serve as a guide for pressing. So once you become really good at sewing, you can kind of skip this basting part and really just mark it. But I would prefer that you actually follow these set of instructions just because I think it's important doing these first projects that you kind of understand every step and how it is going to work. So all the way around the top open, all the way around the top, we are going to mark 1.5 inches down every couple inches. So 1.5 inches. I'm just going to line up the top of the ruler to the top of the pants, and I'm going to make just a little dash. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's right here. I'm just going to make a little dash, and I'm going to do this every couple inches. And basically, I will use this to sew a line all the way around the pants. Now, it's kind of up to you like how much marks you want to make. I would say the more marks you make, the more straight your line will hopefully be. But this part is always a little bit hard, I'm not going to lie, and sometimes gets a little crazy. And we want to do it all the way around because we are going to be sewing in a circle. We are not going to be sewing straight across the top because that would, again, close the top of the pants, and that is not what we are trying to do. We are sewing in a circle around the pants. So for starting to sew, I'm going to take this off again because we are sewing in a circle. So if you take this off, you can kind of put the bottom through here and bring the top on top, and then you know that you won't accidentally sew your pants shut. That would be bad. So we are still on basting. So if you have stopped and it is a new day for you, make sure that this is back at 4. I'm just going to close, and I'm just going to go from one blue line to the other. So I'm not really following a seam allowance. I'm following the blue lines that I made. If you get to a seam in which you didn't sew it down, like because it was cut, make sure that you open it kind of with your fingers and sew over that while it's open rather than when it's shut. Okay, so you can see the blue line that I made here. Again, this is basting. This is temporary. What this is going to do is set us up for like 2 steps from now when we are going to fold this over. And eventually we're going to take all of that hard work out like we never even did it. And it'll look nice and clean. All right, so now that we have our upper edge basted, the next step says press the upper edge of the pants under 1/4 inch. Now, if you have one of those thicker fabrics that you cannot iron, you are going to have to pin this, and that's going to kind of suck. But you got to do what you got to do. So what I'm going to do is go over to the iron, and I am going to press the very top over just a little bit like that. So again, I'm just the very top, and I'm going to press it over like this. You see the baseline down here? So it's just a little bit, and I'm going to press it. And then the next step, I'm going to sew it down. But if you press it, that kind of gets rid of the pinning, which is nice. So I will be back when this is done. Okay, so I have just pressed this down. So now it is staying. And I am going to sew across this close to the folded edge. So I don't want to get too far down here. I want to stay close to the top. All the way around. So again, we're not sewing these shut. We're going in a circle. So we are still basting. So make sure that you are on 4. You're on the biggest one, or 3.5 is fine too. Your biggest one, because we are basting. This is not forever stitching. And this is not necessarily following a seam allowance either. We are just going close to the edge. Okay. Yay. So now we are going to form the casing. This is where we are going to put in the elastic. So it says, pin the casing in place, keeping the pins perpendicular to the folded edge. Right now, we are going to, our pants are still inside out, and we are going to fold, and this first basting stitch we did, the 1.5 inches, this is going to mark as our fold line. So we are going to fold this down, and we want that basted line on top of the pants now. And we are going to pin down here, okay? Like so, all the way around. All right, we are done basting now. So I'm gonna switch my machine back to 2. And now we are going to sew along basically where I pinned, and where you already kind of see a line from your previous basting. You're going to sew down there. You don't want to sew any higher than that, because up here is where we need to put the elastic. Okay, one very important step for this is along one of the seams. Pick whatever seam you want. I'm just going to pick this one in the back. You are going to leave an opening, couple inches. You don't want to sew it shut. You want to leave it open. That is because this is where we need to put in our elastic, and that will be the next step. But for now, I'm just going to sew around the outside, and I am actually even going to make a change here, and where I change how I pinned, I'm going to make 2 vertical pins, and what that is going to do is remind me to stop and keep this much open. So I'm going to show you what I did there. I have these 2 pins right here that are going up and down. This is the big hole I'm going to leave open. So I'm going to start sewing here, and I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm going to end right here. And we are still sewing in a circle. We are not sewing the top of the pants shut. So right now we are just sewing the casing shut. So now I have another line down here. So you will see that this is the right side. So you will see this. Now, the basting line at the top, you can take your seam ripper and rip it out. We don't want it anymore. I don't care if you stop and do that now or if you wait till the end of the project, but I do not want you turning it in with that basting line on top. Now, depending on how good your other basting line stitches were, like these ones, you can take those out. Your bottom ones, there's a lot of extra. If you got it like right on top, you can keep it in, but otherwise take this bottom one out too, but make sure it's not the good one, the big one. You could take that one out. So just remember that you don't want to turn it in with any of your basting lines visible to the right side of the project, and these would be visible. Everyone, welcome model Joey to be my little helper for a few parts of this. So now we are going to work on putting the elastic in the waistband. So what you need to do next is take elastic and you're going to just measure it around your waist and cut the elastic that length. Don't pull it. Don't make it bigger or smaller, just how it naturally folds on your waist. You're going to take that and then cut it. Now you're going to take 2 safety pins and you're going to put 1 safety pin on each end of the elastic. Beautiful. All right, now you are going to find that opening that you left. So mine is right here. I'm going to take 1 safety pin and safety pin it to just underneath that opening on your pants, basically, so we just don't lose our spot. Then we're going to take the other safety pin and we are going to start fishing it through the pants. And the only reason we use the safety pin is just because it's a little easier to grab on inside of the pants and kind of navigate your way through. I'll be back. All right, now I have come to where I have it coming back out to the other side. And I'm just going to kind of, here, it's going to start getting kind of scrunchy in here. And then I'm going to secure this to my pants as well. So I have the elastic going all the way through and secured by the safety pins on here. Now, Joey is going to put the pants on. I'm going to put them right side out now. So Joey is going to put the pants on. Okay. All right, so now you yourself, or you can have someone help you, or I can help you. This is when you're going to decide how tight your elastic needs to be. So I am going to undo both of these, but be careful not to lose it in your pajama pants. But I'm going to undo these. Will you hold this one? Okay, found it. I'm going to undo the other one. And now you, the wearer, hold these, are going to pull them as tight as you need it to be around your waist. Once you have figured out that tightness, undo one of these and then overlap them and secure them to where you need for how tight you want it. So you can kind of see that she is crisscrossing and securing. And now she can take off the pants. All right, so now I have the elastic, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew the pieces together. And you are just basically going to overlap these to where you want. And you are just going to sew over this like a million times so it doesn't become undone. This does not have to look pretty because it's going to be tucked inside your pants, never to be seen after this. So you just want to go over and over and over it so it's nice and secure. Okay. All right, so I sewed over that a bunch of times. My back stitch works, so I just kept kind of going forward and back stitching a billion times. And now you can cut off the excess. Don't need it. If you did that before, that is okay. That's technically what the steps say, but I like to keep it on there just in case of any problems. So now my elastic looks like this. And then you can kind of tuck it back in your pants. And now the hole that is open here, we're going to sew that shut. The next step says to prevent the elastic from rolling, stitch in the ditch, which means to sew on the seam lines of the center front, center back, and the side seams. So you have all 4 seams. Ooh. Need to cut that. You have all 4 seams on the one on the front, one on the back, one on the side, one on the side. You are just going to find the seam right here, and it wants you to put a stitch in there so that the elastic doesn't roll. I'm going to say that that is optional for you guys, and that is only because I have really skinny elastic that if it does roll, it actually doesn't make too much of a difference, because you will see that seam line that you put in. So if you want to do that, and if you don't, I won't be looking for it. All right, the next step is now about hemming the bottom of the pants. So it says to try on the pants and kind of determine how short you need to make them for your own height. I'm just going to do the ones on here, but both legs are essentially the same step as the waist minus the elastic. Though I have had a few students want to make these into joggers and put elastic on the bottoms, which you totally can do if you want. Then you will just basically follow those same steps. But we are going to be hemming the bottom of the pants so they don't look like this. So it says that we are going to baste 1 1/4 inch from each leg. So we're going to make those little marks with tailor chalk. We're going to go around. Then we are going to put it in a little bit and then fold it again. It's literally the same steps, but I will show each step as I do it. You are going to turn the pants back inside out in case you put them right side out to do this part. So we're going to start with making marks 1 1/4 inch all the way around the bottom. I'm going to do it on the front and the back, and I'm going to do both pant legs at the same time. So I do all the same steps all at the same time. But if you want to do one pant leg at a time, be my guest. If your pant legs are a little bit uneven, like you can see mine is here, you can just trim that to match. Now I have both marked, and now I'm going to baste. So I'm going to turn my stitch length back to 4 and sew all the way around. So now I have my basting lines on both legs. Now I'm going to go press just a little bit over like this, all the way around both legs, and then sew. All right, so remember that the basting line that you did is serving as our fold line that we will take out at the end of the project. So what you can do now is fold your pants down until the basting line is on the top of the fold. And then you are going to sew again close to the bottom of the flap that you just flapped over all the way around. The flap that you just flapped over, like what? You should switch your stitch length back to 2 or 2.5 so you get a permanent shut. Now your PJ pants are done. So you want to flip them right side out. And you are going to go through it and make sure there are no loose threads anywhere. And you are going to make sure that you take out all of the basting stitches. So I already took out the top ones here that we did above the waist. So now I just need to take out the bottom ones and then I'm all done.